Before we start, I want you to do something for me. Wherever you are right now, in your car, in your kitchen, in bed with one earbud in, I want you to notice the nearest, darkest doorway. Don't look at it, but notice it. Notice that some part of your brain already had it mapped, already knew exactly where it was. That's because the primitive part of your brain subtly clocks these things. The darkness in your closet before going to bed, or the void underneath your bed. It could very well be nothing, or it could be something out of your worst nightmares. That part of your brain is older than language. It's kept our ancestors alive for hundreds of thousands of years, and has never once believed you when you said, "There's nothing there." My name is Michael Messerly. Welcome to Scary But True. This is Evil. This is the most famous case of demonic possession in American history. And what's strange is, we don't know the boy's name. This inspired the book and the film that made exorcism a household word. Priests wrote about it, newspapers covered it, a hospital tore down a wing over it, and to this day, the church has kept one thing locked away tighter than anything else in the file: the name of the boy it happened to. In the records, he's called Roland Doe, sometimes Robbie. In January of 1949, Robbie was 14 years old. He lived with his parents in a narrow little house in Cottage City, Maryland, in the flat gray suburbs outside of Washington, D.C. He was an only child in a quiet Lutheran home. No history of trouble or history of anything. He's the kind of kid neighbors said you'd forget was in the room. He did, however, have one person who truly saw him: his Aunt Harriet. She doted on him, and she was a spiritualist, a true believer that the dead were only ever a thin wall away, and that the wall had doors in it if you knew how to knock. She taught her nephew the Ouija board. Picture them at the kitchen table on winter evenings, an aunt and a boy, fingertips resting on the planchette, asking their questions into the dark, asking and asking and asking. The thing about doors, especially when talking about the shadow side, is that they don't care who opens them. That January, Aunt Harriet died suddenly, and a few days later, the house started to answer. It began politely. That's the word I keep coming back to when I read this case. Politely. A dripping sound inside the walls where the plumbing didn't run. Then scratching under the floorboards of the boy's bedroom. Faint at first, like an animal working at the wood with one patient claw. His parents did the same thing. They called an exterminator. He pulled up the boards, checked the crawl space, and found nothing alive, nothing dead, nothing at all. The scratching continued, and then it did the thing that no rat has ever done. It moved when the boy moved. Not the room, the boy. They put him in a different bedroom, the scratching relocated beneath that floor. He slept somewhere else in the house, and it followed, always staying underneath him, always inches below where he lay, like something pacing him from the other side of a very thin ceiling. Think about the boy lying in the dark, listening to it. 14 years old, listening to something keep the pace with him from below, night after night. Then it came up, out of the floor. A vase slid from a shelf with no hand near it. Fruit lifted and flew. A framed picture of Christ on the wall began to tremble, witnesses said, as if someone standing inside the wall was pounding on it from behind. At school, in front of a classroom full of children, The boy's desk slid across the floor with him sitting in it, his knuckles white on the edges, going for the wall. His mother broke, and in her desperation, she did the thing you must never do. She addressed it. She stood in that house and gave the darkness the one thing it had been waiting for, an invitation to speak. She asked, "If this is you, Harriet, if this is my sister-in-law, come back to us. Knock 3 times. 3 knocks came out of the wall. And then more. Waves of them rolling through the room, the family later said, like applause. Whatever was in that house, it was done pretending to be Aunt Harriet. The family's Lutheran pastor, a rational, book-lined man, came to observe for himself and left shaken. He'd watched the bed vibrate under the boy. He'd watched a heavy armchair with the boy sitting in it tilt on 2 legs and dump him to the floor like a hand had flipped it. And this Lutheran minister then gave the family a piece of advice that tells you everything about how far past normal they were. He said, "Go to the Catholics. The Catholics have experience with this kind of thing." A local Catholic priest tried. One attempted intervention, and the story that survives from that night ends with the boy wrenching a metal spring loose from the mattress and opening the priest's arm from shoulder to wrist. A 14-year-old and a man of God leaving with his forearm slashed into ribbons. The family did whatever they could. They ran west to the relatives in St. Louis. New house, new city, 700 miles of distance. But distance means nothing to a thing that lives under your skin. Because in St. Louis, it stopped knocking on the walls and started writing on the boy. Red welts rose on his body while adults stood watching, scratches surfacing on his chest and arms with his own hands nowhere near them, thin raised lines swelling up out of the skin, the way of a message rises through paper. Letters, then words. And one night, spelled out across the boy's torso in bleeding capitals, a single word. Lewis. As if it were reading the family's mail, as if it were confirming the address. Yes, here, this is where we finish it. The family found their way to a Jesuit named William Bodern. Father Bodern was a decorated war captain, a man who'd walked through the Pacific Theater, hard-eyed, skeptical, precisely the kind of priest who did not see demons in every draft and creaking stair. The church demands that skepticism. The rite of exorcism requires the church to rule everything else out first. Bodern observed the boy across multiple nights, and then this combat veteran, this professional doubter, wrote to his archbishop and formally requested permission to perform the Roman ritual of exorcism. Permission came back with one instruction attached, and thank God. Keep a diary, write down everything. Father Raymond Bishop kept that diary, 26 pages, single-spaced, dated like a ship's log. And I've got to tell you, the diary is the scariest artifact in this entire story. Precisely because of what it isn't. It isn't dramatic. There are no gasps in it, no purple prose. It reads like a man documenting weather. March 11th. The mattress shook for approximately 15 minutes. It's flat and clinical. The prose of men too exhausted and too frightened to embellish anything. The exorcism did not take one night. It took weeks. Much of it in a locked room in the psychiatric wing of the Alexian Brothers Hospital. And night after night, the ritual played out like a siege. The boy, asleep, or seeming to be, would erupt. He spat with unerring, impossible accuracy into the eyes of the priests praying over him. Across the room, without looking, a voice came out of him that the witnesses swore belonged to no 14-year-old. Deep, mocking, fluent in obscenities, a sheltered Lutheran kid in 1949 had no business knowing. He thrashed with such violence that the Jesuits brought in the muscle, a young seminarian and college football player named Walter Halloran, whose job was simply to hold the boy down. The boy broke Halloran's nose. And Halloran, who lived a long life, who served in Vietnam, who had every opportunity and every incentive to walk it all back, never did. To his dying day, he said the same thing. I watched the scratches rise out of that boy's skin with my own eyes, and I cannot explain them. I held his arms. His hands touched nothing. Weeks of this. The boy waking each morning with no memory, hollow-eyed and thinner. The priests graying by the day, scratching the shaking bed, the voice taunting them in the dark of a locked hospital room while the city slept around them, and nobody outside that room knew it was happening at all. Then came Easter week. One night in April, mid-convulsion, the boy suddenly went still, completely still, and a voice came out of him that the priest said was not the demon's voice, and not quite the boy's voice either. Calm, clear, almost formal. It described a vision, a shining figure in armor holding a sword of fire, driving something down into a pit, and then the boy spoke one word into the silence of that room. Christus. Christ. And it was over. Like a hand lifting off, no relapse, not that night, not ever. The boy woke up, and by every account he grew into an entirely ordinary man. Career, marriage, kids, with little or no memory of the spring of 1949. He was never publicly named, and he never came forward. He carried the most famous haunting in American history around inside him like an old scar, and mowed his lawn and went to work. The Alexian Brothers Hospital eventually demolished the wing where it happened, and before the wreckers came, the story goes, workers went through the old psychiatric floor, and in the locked room, someone opened a drawer. The diary was inside, waiting. Years later, a Georgetown student heard the fragments of this case from a Jesuit instructor. His name was William Peter Blatty. The novel he wrote became The Exorcist, the film that put audiences in ambulances in 1973. So if that movie has ever kept you staring at your ceiling at 3 a.m., the reason why it got under your skin when 1,000 other horror movies didn't is because some ancient part of your brain, the part watching that dark doorway right now, recognized it. It started as 26 typed pages about a real boy in a real bed in a real room that the church decided was safer as rubble. If you're enjoying Scary But True, please remember to leave a rating, as well as a like and a comment. Also, if you could shoot me a follow wherever you're listening on any audio platform, that helps me out a lot. Thank you so much for listening. Now back to the episode. November 2011 in Gary, Indiana. Steeltown streets. Half of the houses are empty. It's the kind of city where nobody has the money to waste on ghost stories. A single mother named Latoya Ammons signs a lease on a small white rental house on Carolina Street. 1 story and a basement. Rent she could actually afford, and if you've ever been a broke single parent, you know that's the whole decision right there. She moves in with her mother, Rosa, and her 3 kids, 12, 9, and 7. She has no idea. There's no warning, no creepy realtor or local legend, no previous tenants fled in the night, just a cheap white house in November. But the first sign are the flies. It's December in northwest Indiana, hard freeze, the kind of cold that kills every insect for 100 miles, and the screened-in porch fills with black flies, swarming the screens, crawling on the door. Rosa kills them, sprays them, swats them, sweeps up the bodies, and the next day they're back. She kills them again, they come back again. She'll say it later in one sentence that I've never been able to shake, and I want you to hear the exhaustion in it. We killed them, and killed them, and killed them, and they kept coming back. Winter, flies. Then, the stairs. Footsteps at night coming up from the basement, heavy and deliberate. A grown man's weight on the wooden treads, in a house whose only man is 9 years old. The basement door began creaking onto a dark and empty kitchen. Then one night, Rosa wakes up and sees him, a silhouette of a man, crossing the living room in the dark. She gets up. There's nobody there, the doors are locked and windows are latched. But there on the floor, she says, glistening in the streetlight, wet boot prints, leading through a locked house, going nowhere. Now, to be fair, everything so far can be explained. Old house, settling wood, flies breeding in a wall void, a grandmother's half dream at 2 a.m. Basically the same as 10,000 other stories. But this story is different because it gets a case number. In March of 2012, the 12-year-old daughter is in her bedroom, and according to her mother and grandmother, who are standing right there, the girl rises off the bed. Unconscious, levitating, they said, above the mattress, while the adults in the room pray out loud until she sinks back down. She wakes, remembering nothing. LaToya does everything a person can do with no money in a haunted house. Churches, clairvoyance. She told her house spirits, or maybe many spirits. She pours olive oil on the doors and windows. She burns sage. She draws crosses. She moves the family Bible from room to room like a sandbag against a flood. Nothing works. And worse than that, the activity shifts. It loses interest in the house because it's found the children. The kids change. Their mother describes their eyes bulging, their voices dropping into registers no child's throat should produce. And the smiles, evil smiles, she called them, wrong smiles on her own baby's faces. The 7-year-old starts sitting in his closet, holding long, murmured conversations with a boy nobody else can see. And then one day, that 7-year-old wraps both hands around his big brother's throat and squeezes, calm and strong and silent, and does not stop until the adults physically tear him off. LaToya takes the boys to the family doctor in April of 2012. A medical office. In that office, in front of the doctor and his staff, both boys convulse. Voices come out of them that staff would later tell reporters made them afraid to be in the building. One of the boys goes into the wall, thrown or throwing himself, and witnesses genuinely could not agree which. The clinic calls 911, and someone else in that building makes a second call to the Department of Child Services. The working theory while CPS drives to that hospital is not possession. The working theory is Munchausen, coaching, abuse, a woman damaging her children for attention. The caseworker assigned is named Valerie Washington. Her entire professional skill set is one thing, which is seeing through families who lie. April 19th, 2012, Methodist Hospital. Washington is interviewing the family in a small exam room alongside a registered nurse named Willie Lee Walker. The 9-year-old is there with his grandmother, and as they talk, the boy starts to growl, low in his chest, an animal sound. His eyes roll back. Rosa grabs his hands and starts to pray, and the boy grins, that unnatural, evil grin. And then, in front of a state child services investigator and a registered nurse, in a hospital, under fluorescent light, the 9-year-old boy walks up the wall, backwards. Feet on the wall, body arched, gliding up the vertical surface and onto the ceiling. And here's the detail witnesses could never square with physics or with hoaxing. He never lets go of his grandmother's hand. He walks the wall and ceiling like a track, flips, and lands on his feet in the middle of the room. Smooth and practiced. Impossible. The nurse, Walker, a grown medical professional, ran out of the room, and Valerie Washington, the professional skeptic, the woman who's sent there specifically to catch this family lying, went back to her office and typed what she saw into her official report. It is in the file, in the records of the state of Indiana, in a government document you could theoretically request. There is a caseworker's first-hand account of a child walking up a wall. The state takes the children away, maybe especially because of what they saw. And to get her kids back, Latoya Ammons has to prove her home is safe, which means the system now has to inspect the house, which means police officers are about to walk into it. Captain Charles Austin, Gary PD, 36 years on the force in one of the hardest cities in America. He goes in certain that this is a hustle. A family cooking up a story to sue a landlord or sell a book. Inside the house, his officers' radios begin to fail. Static, garbled, dead, then fine again outside. An officer's recorder running in the empty basement picks up a whisper. One syllable. It sounds like, "Hey." A police photograph shot into the house captures in a window a white smoky figure that no one can account for. On a later visit, officers stand and watch an oily liquid seep down the blinds into a room that had been sealed shut. They wipe it clean, they seal the room again, and it comes back. Captain Austin, 36-year veteran, told reporters on the record, flat, "I'm a believer." He started referring to the place as the house of 200 demons, and he claimed the strangeness followed him home, that his own garage door began opening on its own, that his radio dial spun, that whatever it was he had noticed him. The church sends a priest, Father Michael Magano. He interviews the family, petitions the Diocese of Gary, and receives something vanishingly rare in the modern Catholic Church: formal authorization. Over 2012, he performs exorcism rites on Latoya Ammons herself, in Latin and English, by the book, with the bishop's blessing. Then, it all stops. The family is reunited. They move away from Carolina Street and never once go back. Now, when the Indianapolis Star broke this story in 2014, the skeptics came in hard. They had material. Old creaky house, a stressed family primed by exorcism movies, kids who perform what adults fear. The famous investigator Joe Nickel picked the case apart, and even Latoya's own stepmother went public calling the story false, saying the family name was being dragged through the mud. The wall walk, skeptics note, sounds a lot like a kid bracing between walls, embellishing in the retelling. Maybe, but the file is 800 pages. The caseworker never recanted, the nurse never recanted, the police captain went to his grave a believer. And the report is still the report. Zach Bagans of Ghost Adventures bought the house, sight unseen, for $35,000. He filmed a documentary inside of it, and people who worked on that film reported illness, injuries, and worse. And when he was done, in 2014, Zach Bagans, a man whose entire livelihood is haunted buildings, a man for whom a real demon house is literally priceless, hired a crew and tore it down to the dirt. Today, there's nothing on that lot on Carolina Street but grass. And the tenants who lived in the house after the Ammons family? Nothing. Not a fly or a footstep or a whisper, which leaves exactly two possibilities. Either it was the house, or whatever lived there had already found what it wanted and left with the family that ran. Anneliese Michel was born in September of 1952 in Klingenberg, Bavaria, a storybook town of steep roofs and vineyards on the River Main, in a corner of Germany where the Catholic faith wasn't Sunday decoration, but the architecture of reality itself. God was real, the saints were real, and the devil was real. If you find a photograph of Anneliese at 16, you'll see a slight, dark-haired girl with careful eyes and a shy, closed-lipped smile, devout and gentle, serious about school. She wanted to become a teacher, to spend her life with children. Hold on to that photograph in your mind. I need you to remember her like that because everyone else remembers her the other way, and she deserved better. In 1968, when she was 16, her body turned on her. She woke one night, unable to move. Not scared stiff, unable. Paralyzed, a crushing weight pressing down on her chest, her tongue swollen huge in her mouth. Wet warmth spreading beneath her as her body let go of itself. It passed, it came back. Seizures followed, and doctors delivered a diagnosis: temporal lobe epilepsy. Temporal lobe epilepsy. Of all of the seizure disorders, it is the one infamous for a specific symptom: the overwhelming, electric certainty of a presence, of something in the room with you. Neurologists have known this for a century. So, was what happened next a girl's deceased temporal lobe? Or was it her illness simply the crack in the wall that something used to get in? Around 1970, the face arrived. Anneliese began to see it when she prayed. A devil's face, she said. A grinning, hideous face surfacing out of the air, out of the walls, hanging itself over the faces of the people she loved. Then the voices came. They followed her down staircases. They spoke over her prayers. They told her she was damned, that she was rotting, that hell was already holding a place for her. She told her doctors about the voices, told them the voices talked to her during her treatments, mocking the medicine. The pills did nothing to them. The voices found the pills funny. And then the sweet girl in the photograph began to disappear. Anneliese, who had prayed a rosary her whole life, tore a rosary apart with her hands. She could no longer walk past a crucifix. She'd detour through rooms to avoid one. Holy water burned her, she said. The church she'd grown up inside, the pews she'd known since baptism, she physically could not cross the threshold, as if the doorway itself pushed back. And at home, in that tiny Bavarian house, things happened that no diagnosis in her file seemed to cover. She ate spiders and flies off of the floor. She licked her own urine off of the tiles. She barked for hours, a deep kennelled sound coming out of a 100-pound girl, until the walls of the house seemed to hold it. She hid beneath the kitchen table for days at a time. She tore off her clothes in freezing rooms. At night, her family lay in their beds and listened to their daughter scream through the walls until dawn. Her parents took her everywhere. Neurologists, psychiatrists, clinics, medication stacked on medication, and to be clear, she took the pills. For years she took the pills, and she got worse and worse and worse. So in a family, in a town, in a world where the devil was not a metaphor, they turned to the last door they knew, and the church said no. For years, the Catholic Church, the institution you'd expect to come running with holy water, examined Anneliese and turned the family away. Priests told them, "Trust the doctors, this is illness." The church's own rules demand every natural explanation to be exhausted first. Petition after petition, the church refused. One young priest, however, Father Ernest Alt, met her, corresponded with her, and became convinced that what he was watching was not epilepsy. And in summer of 1975, the Bishop of Würzburg finally signed the authorization, the Ritual Romanum, the big rite, to be performed in strict secrecy in the family home by an elderly, experienced priest named Arnold Renz. Between September 1975 and July of 1976, Father Renz performed the rite of exorcism on Anneliese Michel 67 times, 67 sessions, some lasting 4 hours. Sessions where the small young woman had to be held down by 3 grown men. Sessions where, for a period, they resorted to restraints. And Father Renz brought something into that room that no exorcist in history had brought before. A tape recorder. More than 40 of those sessions exist on audio, reel after reel. They are real. They were played in an open court, and they have leaked over the decades out into the world. They are on the internet right now, a search away from wherever you're sitting. I know what you're expecting me to do next. This is a scary podcast. This is the part of the episode where the host hits play. I'm not going to play them. I have them. I've listened to them weeks ago, alone, so I could tell you this story honestly, and I will tell you what's on them. Sounds I genuinely cannot explain coming out of a human throat. 2 voices at once, guttural, layered snarling in German that seems to come from somewhere below where a voice should live. Howling that spikes exactly when the old priest's Latin lands on certain words. Voices that interrupt each other, voices that argue with each other because they claimed there were 6 of them in her, and they gave her names to the tape: Lucifer, Cain, Judas, Nero, Hitler, and a disgraced priest from that very region, dead 400 years, named Fleischmann. 6 demons announcing themselves through the mouth of an exhausted girl in her parents' house while an old man read scripture and the reels went round and round. The tapes are some of the scariest audio I've ever heard, but I'm not going to play them. And there's a reason why. Between those sessions, in her calm hours, Anneliese was lucid. That's the detail that breaks my heart and breaks the whole case open. She wrote letters in a neat hand. She talked with her family. She spoke about her suffering as something she had accepted, an offering, she believed, an atonement for the sins of others, for her generation, for wayward priests. She didn't want to be rescued from it. She believed it meant something. A 22-year-old who wanted to teach children, deciding her agony was the most useful thing about her. And through that winter, 1975 into 1976, Anneliese stopped eating. Maybe the voices forbade food, as she said. Maybe fasting was her own desperate penance. Maybe her ravaged body was simply shutting down. The sessions continued, 67 of them, remember? Her knees ruptured, actually structurally ruptured, from genuflecting, dropping to her knees in prayer hundreds of times a day until she was doing it broken. She contracted pneumonia, her fever climbed, her weight fell, and the priests kept coming with the ritual, and her parents, watching their daughter turn skeletal in an upstairs bedroom called the rectory. Not an ambulance, the rectory. On the evening of June 30th, 1976, Anneliese, too weak to kneel anymore, held up by others so she could genuflect one last time, spoke to her mother. Her last known words were not a demon's. There was no growl in them. Just a girl in the dark, saying, "Mother, I'm afraid." On the morning of July 1st, 1976, Anneliese Michel was found dead in her bed. She was 23 years old. She weighed 68 pounds. This is why I won't play the tapes. Because whatever is on them, a demon or a dying epileptic girl in psychotic agony, one of those two things is true. And in either case, what those reels recorded is a 23-year-old being destroyed. If it's demons, playing them is handing 6 named things a microphone. And if it's illness, then it's the audio of a young woman's death, month by month. And to be honest, playing that for entertainment's sake just doesn't sit right with me. You can find these audio recordings. If you're curious, I would encourage you to do so, but just be careful of what you find, because they are disturbing. But to broadcast this poor 23-year-old girl's slow decay is not something I'm comfortable with. She said she was afraid, and we're gonna let her rest. But her story wasn't finished, and what happened next is why the entire world knows her name. The state of Germany looked at that bedroom, at the starved body, and it prosecuted her mother, her father, and both priests, charged with negligent homicide for standing in a circle around a treatable young woman and letting her starve while they fought devils. The trial, in 1978, became a global sensation, and it produced one of the most surreal scenes in modern legal history. The tapes were played in open court. Jurors in fluorescent-lit German courtroom, sitting in rows, listening to those layered, snarling voices fill the chamber. The sound of what either was or wasn't hell itself entered into the record as evidence. And then they convicted all 4 defendants. Negligent homicide. 6 months suspended. The court's verdict, in effect, there was no demon. The evil in that bedroom was human. It was certainty. It was neglect wearing the mask of love, and faith turned like a blade against the very girl it was supposed to protect. Both priests went to their graves insisting that possession was real. Her mother, decades later, an old woman, said she had no regrets, that they had done the right thing, that Anneliese was with God. So, you get to choose your own horror tonight. And I mean it when I say there is no comfortable option on the menu. Either the tapes are exactly what they sound like, and 6 things that give their names as Lucifer, Cain, Judas, Nero, Hitler, and Fleischmann are on magnetic tape, and they won. Or there was never anything in that room but a sick young woman who needed a hospital, surrounded on all sides by people who loved her, every single one of whom was certain they were battling evil, while the evil in the room was the certainty itself. Her grave in Killingburg is still there, on the hill. Pilgrims still come. Some come to pray for her. Some come to pray to her. Thank you so much for listening. Please remember to leave a like, comment, shoot me a follow, and a rating wherever you're listening. If you have your own true scary story, email it over to me at scarybutTruePod@gmail.com. Again, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time for more scary but true.